When I pulled into my old driveway after 10 long years, I never imagined the street I grew up on would feel like enemy territory. My childhood home, the one my father built with his bare hands, now sat behind new fences, new rules, and a new face running the neighborhood, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, Karen. Within minutes of my return, she was on my lawn, clipboard in hand, shouting about violations. But when she showed up again, this time with a man pretending to be a cop, I realized this wasn't about rules at all. It was about control. And I was about to find out just how far she'd go to keep me off my own land. I'd been gone for a decade. 10 years of city life chasing stability after my father passed and our family home fell quiet. When I finally returned, it wasn't just to visit. It was to rebuild what he left behind. The small suburban neighborhood looked the same on the surface. Manicured lawns, pastel houses, and those same decorative mailboxes everyone seemed weirdly proud of. But something was different. The warmth was gone. Conversations stopped when I walked by. People glanced from behind their curtains, whispering like I didn't belong anymore. That's when I learned about the HOA's new president, Karen. She'd moved in 5 years earlier and turned the once friendly community into a rule-obsessed battlefield. Every flower bed, paint color, and trash can placement had to go through her approval. At first, I tried to stay polite. I mowed my lawn, fixed the porch, and kept to myself. But it didn't take long for the first warning letter to arrive. A notice taped to my front door claiming my fence violated updated neighborhood standards. My father had built that fence, the same one everyone used to compliment. That's when I realized this wasn't about a fence, it was about control, and Karen wasn't about to let me live on my land without a fight. The first few days back in my father's house felt like a fragile kind of peace, the kind you don't realize is temporary until it's gone. I woke up to the sound of birds, brewed coffee on the old counter he built, and watched the sunrise spill across the porch. For a moment it felt like home again. But by the end of that week the letters began. Each one came in a white HOA envelope, neatly folded, with words sharp enough to cut. Unauthorized structure, improper fence height, non-compliant exterior paint. They fined me for everything, even the mailbox, which hadn't changed in 20 years. When I walked to the HOA office to talk things out, Karen was waiting. Perfectly dressed, lips pressed in a thin smile, she spoke as if I were a child who had broken something valuable. "This community has standards," she said. "We can't have exceptions just because of history." I could tell what she meant. I wasn't one of them anymore. I was the outsider, the reminder of a time before her rule. From that day forward, it was a war of inches. Every improvement I made, every small repair, somehow violated a rule. If I replaced a fence panel, they said it wasn't regulation wood. If I planted flowers, they weren't the approved color palette. Once I found Karen standing in my yard with a tape measure, actually measuring the distance between my plants and the curb. I started documenting everything. Photos, letters, timestamps, anything that could prove this was more than petty enforcement. It was harassment. My neighbors stayed silent. Some looked away when I passed. Others whispered apologies but wouldn't dare cross her. Karen had a way of making people's lives miserable if they didn't comply. Then came the fines. First $50, then $100, then $300 for continued defiance. The total hit over $1,000 in a month. She even threatened to place a lien on my property, the same house my father built from scratch, the only piece of him I had left. That night, I sat in my living room surrounded by the warning letters, feeling the weight of every word pressing on me. I wasn't just fighting an HOA anymore. I was fighting for my family's name, for the right to exist in the place where I grew up. But Karen wasn't done. One morning, I stepped outside to find a notice of violation nailed to my front door. It claimed I had unauthorized construction happening on the property. There was nothing there, just my old tools on the porch. It didn't make sense, until I noticed the security camera she'd installed across the street, angled directly at my house. She was watching me. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Fear turned to resolve. I filed complaints with the county, reported her behavior, even consulted a lawyer. But HOAs have layers of protection, and every legal door I tried to open slammed shut. Then came the breaking point. It was late evening when headlights flashed across my lawn. I stepped outside to find Karen standing beside a man in a police uniform. He had no badge number, no name tag, but she was holding a clipboard, waving papers in the air. "This is official," she shouted. "You need to vacate immediately. This property is no longer compliant." For a second, I actually froze. Then I looked closer. The officer's patch didn't match the local department. It was fake. She'd brought someone pretending to be a cop to intimidate me off my land. That night, I realized the fight had reached a new level. This wasn't about property lines or paint colors anymore. It was about power, ego, and the kind of person who can't stand losing control. And I made a promise right then. She'd regret ever stepping onto my father's porch again. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of engines, like not one, but several. When I looked outside, there were 3 HOA board members standing beside Karen, clipboards in hand, pointing at my house like it was some kind of crime scene. A tow truck idled near my driveway, ready to remove what they claimed was an unauthorized vehicle. It was my late father's pickup, the same one he used to build every corner of this home. That was it. I'd had enough. I stepped outside with my phone recording, calm but burning inside. Karen's smile wavered when she realized I wasn't backing down this time. I asked her to read out loud the specific bylaw that allowed them to tow a registered, fully functional vehicle from private property. Her words stumbled. I pressed again. Which section? Which law? Her voice cracked. The camera caught everything. Then, as if fate had timed it, a real police cruiser pulled up. My report from the night before about the fake cop and I had gone through. The officer stepped out, and Karen's face drained of color. I handed him the footage of her hiring a man to impersonate an officer, along with weeks of documentation. The letters, the harassment, the illegal surveillance camera. The HOA board members slowly backed away as the officer started questioning her. Her composure shattered. The clipboard slipped from her hand. She tried to twist the story, saying it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence spoke louder than any excuse she could muster. For the first time, the neighbors who'd watched in silence gathered around. Not to whisper, but to witness. They saw the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood finally cornered by her own arrogance, and as the officer escorted her down my driveway, all I could think was how poetic it felt. Her finally leaving the land she swore I didn't deserve to stand on. But I didn't celebrate yet, because in HOA communities, even when one battle ends, another rule is always waiting to be broken. For days after that confrontation, the neighborhood was quiet, unnaturally quiet. The gossip stopped. The letters stopped. Even the board meetings went on temporary suspension. Word spread fast. Karen had stepped down as HOA president, facing charges for impersonation and harassment. Her once feared authority dissolved overnight. I kept my distance, rebuilding the peace she'd worked so hard to destroy. I repainted the porch, trimmed the fence, and replaced the old mailbox, not to meet her rules, but to honor my father's pride in this home. One by one, the same neighbors who used to avoid eye contact began to stop by. Some apologized. Others shared their own stories of fines and intimidation. It turned out I wasn't the only one she'd bullied, just the first who refused to break. Months later, the HOA elected a new board, and this time, they reinstated every unfair fee Karen had pushed. The lien vanished, and so did the fear that had ruled our street for years. Standing on that porch one last time, I realized something important. Sometimes, fighting back isn't about winning paperwork battles or proving a point. It's about reclaiming your peace, your right to stand where you belong even when others try to take it from you. Because when power is built on fear, it only lasts until someone finally says, "Enough."